They had lived in the laboratory for 200 years. To catch a glimpse of the world outside, a small group fired grappling lines onto a steel beam. Then they pushed themselves to the limit, sprinting toward a wall nearly 100 meters tall. Minutes later, they finally reached the top. Just as they moved to cut the fence, a surge of high voltage knocked them backward, and they nearly plunged to their deaths. The girl scanned the perimeter and spotted the power truck feeding the electrified barrier. She drew a sharp breath, released her grip, and dropped. She hit the ground and rushed back at full speed. The pursuers had already picked up the escapee's trail. She weaved through gunfire and dashed for the truck. She planted the charges and ran. A split second later, the battery exploded with a boom. The line shorted out, and the electrified fence burned through immediately. They seized the opening and scrambled up the wall. With cover from her teammates, Annie finally cleared the danger zone. She cut through the fence in a flash. But just as she was about to step into the world beyond the lab, one of them was shot and died on the spot. Jack dragged Annie out of the kill zone. There was no time to grieve, they had to keep moving. Beyond the wall was a sheer cliff. They climbed down and landed safely, hearts pounding. And then reality hit. The outside world wasn't beautiful at all. After a kilometer on foot, the thriving forest ended at a sharp dividing line. Past it lay only poisoned earth. Even the river, once supposed to run clear, had turned dark and tainted. They had escaped with hope in their chests, only to find this waiting for them. Some began to waver. Maybe the lab had been the safer choice after all. Then acid rain started to fall without warning. It burned their skin, charged with radiation. Jack spotted an abandoned cabin, and they rushed inside. As the hours crawled by, their hope thinned to almost nothing. Someone even suggested surrendering, maybe they'd still be allowed to live. But Annie refused to believe this was all there was. After an entire night, the storm finally passed. They followed the polluted river upstream, thinking there might be a factory or some other source. Then came a deep, grinding roar. An off-road vehicle appeared. Lab hunters were closing in. They hurried over rough ground, hoping the terrain would slow their pursuers. But the hunters stayed on them. They were seconds from being caught, when the air ahead shimmered, as if reality itself had rippled. An invisible gate opened right in front of them. Above, a spacecraft slid into view. The strangers addressed each of them by name and told them not to panic. A squad of soldiers formed a line at the gate. The craft dropped lower and opened fire, leaving the pursuers frozen in disbelief. This kind of technology was beyond them. The hunters were driven back, and the invisible gate snapped shut. The newcomers didn't seem hostile. They used handheld devices to wrap the group in a thin, protective film, shielding them from further radiation. The film clung to the spacecraft's hull as it lifted off. Half an hour later, an oasis appeared, and with it, a dazzling high-tech city. The spacecraft descended smoothly. The protective film lowered them to the ground. They were escorted inside for decontamination, and only then did the film slowly dissolve. After a full sterilization, Annie was instructed to place her hand into a scanning and printing unit. A mark was printed onto each person's hand. Once the process was over, they regrouped in the main hall.